All right. Perfect. Do you mind just saying hello one more time so I make sure it picks you up?
Hello.
Excellent. All right. Okay, so I'm going to go podcast mode. So here we go. All right. So on today's episode, we have Devin. Devin Wendel is from Vermont, and he has had a background at a number of different schools, both as an athletic trainer and an athletic director. And right now, Devin, you're at Mount Abraham Union High School. And I think I saw actually that you were a graduate of Mount Abraham Union. Is that correct?
Yeah, that is correct. So I graduated in 2007 from Mount Abraham.
Awesome. And did you play sports in high school yourself?
I did, yeah. So I played football, basketball, and baseball while I was at Mount Abraham.
Very cool. And when you were in high school, was there a big focus on strength and conditioning, or how did that typically work back in your day?
So no, there really wasn't. The the strength and conditioning program back then was essentially, a few of us guys getting a gym membership over the summer and, working out for the football program. Otherwise, there wasn't really a whole lot done. We had a really small weight room, a lot of pulley machines, and I almost want to say we even had like some gas powered equipment back then,
Yeah.
like pneumatic stuff. But no, we didn't really have any sort of program itself, and it was a big wake up call for me when I went to Endicott College. I got accepted onto their football team, and I showed up, and it was just a night and day experience as to what the expectation was regarding strength and conditioning. So it was a pretty humbling experience, but it definitely was something that made me think like, wow, this is something that we really need to get jump started at Mount Abraham.
Gotcha. And that type of shift is something that a lot of high schools are going under right now. So was it your first thought to kind of start getting some new equipment that maybe necessarily didn't need gas powered, or were you in like the direction of trying to get a program in place? What was your first train of thought there?
Sure. So basically, what I did when I got hired at Mount Abraham, the weight room turned into one of my number one projects because it's something that can benefit all of the programs at the school. It's not just going to benefit basketball or just going to benefit baseball or softball. Anybody can go in and use that space and get better, right? So with that being said, our weight room's only, I believe, 22 by 21 feet, so it's just over 400 square feet, so it's pretty small. So we had to really take a look at like, okay, what's the most important equipment we can have in here, what needs to go, which ended up being pretty much everything. We kind of gutted the whole room, laid down some rubberized flooring, and went to a model with a really open middle floor space, 2 squat racks, and a bunch of free weights and resistance bands and balance equipment, to try to, again, encompass as much as we could for all sports, and also still be able to get all of our core and power lifts done safely and effectively in that space.
Yeah, and that's a lot of what, the school I was at did as well, was kind of create that open space and, especially trying to make room so everybody feels like they can be a part of it. And you use the word we a few times. Who was it, that joined you in that process? Was it, other coaches, other teachers? Who really took that initiative with you to say, this is a place that we want to invest in, just our human capital, as well as maybe some, dollars and cents possibly as well?
Sure. So yeah, it was totally a team effort. I just, for my strength and conditioning background, I knew that the space was unsafe. So I was like, okay, what do we need to do to first of all get rid of this equipment? So we had kind of the room audited. Our safety inspector for our school's insurance company came down and basically said, yeah, this stuff's got to go. So we got rid of it. We had several team meetings and shared documents with all of our PE teachers, our coaches. We got a big list of wants and asks for what they would like to see in the room, what they think the floor plan should look like, and then we kind of had several meetings to follow to decide, okay, what is this room actually going to look like? What are we actually going to put into it? And we kept it a really collaborative effort all the way down to the some of the what we call like power words on the walls. So we had like some vinyl cutouts made from one of our design technology teachers helped us make them. So we put in like effort, pride, focus, determination.
Cool.
everything from what equipment was going in to the words that were on the wall it was a team effort. And so I would say, myself, our athletic trainer, Meg Quiet, our coaching staff, our PE department, our facilities staff for helping to, get all the stuff out of there and also install the new floor. So it was really cool to see it all kind of come together. And that's, for me, having some sort of vision and then, kind of tackling it in a team environment and accomplishing that vision or meeting that goal is always incredibly rewarding. And we're starting to see the results now that it's been up and about for this will be its second full year.
Okay, awesome. And a perfect place that you mentioned is getting both physical education and athletics involved. So where did you guys sort of address that overlap? Was it younger kids were going to start in physical education, and as they grew, they would benefit from it in athletics, or was it sort of a crossover? Where did that play in with both PE and athletics wanting to be a part of this?
Sure. So we're pretty lucky in our school that one of our coaches or one of our department head PE teacher is also our varsity girls soccer coach. So we communicate very closely in both the athletic environment and also in the classroom environment. So it was really easy to work with him and kind of decide, how this kind of looks. I really left the education piece to Dustin as the teacher leader, and he manages all of that side of things. And then we left the team approach thing to me to help out any individual programs that are looking to start a program or how to use the weights and the equipment safely. We're still kind of growing on the education side of things. We're definitely including it in our curriculum now, whereas it was really difficult to try to get a lot of kids into that space in the past, but it's becoming a much more widely used and accepted space. So we're hoping to just continue to keep improving it.
Awesome. Well, that's a good, starting point. I think the next place that we start to talk about is what it actually looks like. You hear about the setup, you hear about the process of getting everything in order, but like, what's a typical day in the weight room look like? Is it busy? Is it crowded? Who's actually manning that kind of supervising or coaching role? What are those kind of day in and day out aspects of the weight room look like for you guys at Mount Abraham?
Sure. So it's really dependent on what the unit is in PE. The PE students and department would be using it during the day, basically between 8 a.m. and 3 p.m. And it really just varies on which time of year it is and how many kids are enrolled in how many sections. And we've had, again, this is a 400 square foot weight room, and sometimes we'll have 30 kids in there. It's right. Where it's like, okay, you have 2 square feet to do your bicep curls, and we make it work. That's the thing. It's we try really, really hard to make sure that they get exposed to that space so that kids aren't fearful of that space. They're not fearful of lifting weights, and it's such a good educational environment in there. And we're always looking for new ways to either expand the space or to break up sectioning a little bit so we're not so overloaded in there, because it gets really hot really quickly, with 30 kids in a teeny little weight room. But and then after school, again, that's where I think we've seen the biggest improvement in our programming is it's being used after school all the time. And it's really exciting, between the baseball program, the field hockey program, the football program, they're all really buying into the new space and how it works. And, also again, with us going and getting into platform this fall, we've had, again, more coaches kind of more willing to get in there and use some of the training videos and tutorials to teach a technique that maybe they otherwise wouldn't have done. Basically, our only rule in the weight room as far as supervision goes is you have to be an adult, and there has to be at least one other person in there with you. So, as a coach, you would want to have, at least obviously one other student athlete, but you would also want to have ideally your whole team there if possible. So, and it's that adult's responsibility to supervise the space. And then I always tell all of our coaches and PE teachers that if they need help as far as implementing a program or really teaching the fundamentals behind a lift, especially some of the more complicated lifts, like some of our power lifts that we do in there, to seek myself out, or some of our other coaches that are experienced in those techniques. But yeah, it's been really exciting to see it grow, and I would say it's getting a lot more use than it ever has, especially in the afternoon. And we're seeing the results in the hallways. Like, you can see it in kids walking down the hallway, where you're like, wow, that kid's shoulders are a little bit wider than they were last
Yeah,
year.
sure.
So
Sure.
it's exciting to see.
That's great. And I think one of the big things too is, as you mentioned, is just getting other coaches feeling like they can get in there. A lot of places like yourself, you have a school of about 500 students, and as an athletic director, we hear a lot of people say, it's typically coach by coach, and myself included as a coach, that doesn't necessarily make me an expert in coaching the deadlift to a bunch of beginner athletes. So, were there coaches that were hesitant at first and then sort of started to buy in once they saw other teams getting involved? Or did it just take some of that collaboration amongst those coaches and teachers for them to say, you know what, I'm going to take part in this as well?
Yeah, so I think it's just been really collaborative overall. I think our coaches that were unsure of themselves or unsure of how to teach a technique properly either watch the videos and train themselves, and kind of got that background knowledge of what are some key points of this lift, or they sought me out, or Jeff Stein, our other coach that's very knowledgeable in pretty much every lift there is in the weight room.
Sure.
But yeah, it's been collaborative. They've sought us out. They asked for us to come to the first few sessions and, really coach the kids up as to how to do the lift, how to do it safely, what are the key points behind the lift. And then once we see that they're consistently doing it safely, then it's more of just a supervision piece for that head coach from there on out, and then it's their responsibility to, hey coach, here are the key points you're looking for with deadlift. Please make sure you correct this if I'm not here, but otherwise, everybody's looking pretty good and I don't have any glaring concerns at this moment,
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that sounds good, and a really good kind of snapshot of the different things that you've been doing within the weight room. So we're going to just take a quick break, and when we come back, I want to hear a little bit more, from your perspective, Devin, as an athletic trainer, some of the benefits just you've seen on and off the field because the kids are getting in the weight room.
Sure. Awesome. That sounds great.
All right. So doing good so far. Anything I'm missing? Anything you want me to touch on, or how are we doing?
No, I think we're doing good.
Awesome.
It's kind of funny to just to kind of think back at this whole process. It's been really cool since I've been at Mount Abe. Like I was saying earlier in the podcast, it's just like we didn't have any of this stuff. We didn't. I tell this story to our kids, our football players, and I say, guys, I was so embarrassed when I showed up to Endicott and I couldn't even bench press 185, and everybody else around me was just like cranking out reps upon reps upon reps, and I'm like, oh my god, what did I just get myself into, was my first thought.
Yeah, exactly.
But then you get into it and you get experienced with it, and you train, and you basically just get bigger, stronger, faster, and you build that confidence. And we're like, we have a group of 8th graders right now that are so bought in. It's unbelievable. And like every time I see them, I'm like, wow, that kid is getting so much stronger. And we're always talking about like, man, what is that kid going to look like in 3 years? Like he's 13 years old, or he's 14 years old. Like what is he going to become?
Yeah, and it's exciting. Cool too, because those kids, you're building such a strong foundation. It's like the technique, the form, everything is like, certain kids are going to be able to bench 185 just because that's the type of kid they are. Sure. For the rest of us that can't just pick up a bar and do that, like the form and technique, just like in 8th grade, 9th grade, like I would kill to go back to my 8th grade, 9th grade self and be like, why don't you go do like an intro program?
Exactly. And that's the thing. And just from a safety standpoint too, like, again, I just think back to my experience, and they're like, all right, get under the squat rack, and we're repping 225, and I couldn't do 225, so it's like, okay, here we go. And so it's just, I feel like what we're giving these kids, they are getting such a giant boost heading into their freshman, sophomore years of high school.
Sure.
That and I actually have a good story. I'll try to stick it in at some point during the podcast, but we actually just had a kid transfer go to a local football school or another larger local school to us, and he got into their kind of summer training program, and their coach reached out to ours and said, "Hey, this kid's got like really good form. What'd you guys do?" Because
That's great.
he credited us and the platform program with like his form, and he was one of the only kids that had good form. And it's like, well, this is why he has good form, because he just worked out for the last 16 weeks with us, and was really dedicated to it, and that's why he's got good form. So
for sure.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. Well, I will probably end up taking that 8th grade story and snippeting in somewhere anyways. So
cool.
Because that was awesome. But
yeah,
we'll put back on like the podcast at. So
sure.
All right, so here we go. We're going to jump back in. Again, we have Devin here from Mount Abraham talking over a lot of his experience, both as an athletic director, as a person in the weight room, just coaching kids up. Devin, I want to jump back in and ask you just what you see. You talked about the benefits walking around, just looking at shoulders growing, looking at kids improving. But what are some of the other benefits, almost as a trainer, you would equate to kids getting into the weight room?
Sure. So, the biggest thing as an athletic trainer is injury prevention, right? If we can find effective ways to reduce the risk of injury in the first place, then that saves us a ton of time, energy, and potentially, for the family or the kid, a bunch of medical costs down the road, if we're preventing like an ACL tear, surgery, anything like that. So the more we do preemptively and proactively, the better place we're going to put our student athletes in, right? So while we haven't quite seen, we just haven't had the program established for quite long enough yet, but I can say that our injury numbers are very high. I feel like we had a lot of injuries over the past 2 years, especially in our football seasons. We actually also had 3 ACL tears just this past fall, all on one team. So that's, it's stuff like that. When you look at that kind of data, like that's almost a statistical anomaly, right? So what are we going to do? We have to ask ourselves that question. What are we going to do, myself and our athletic trainer, to proactively address that?
Right.
What are we going to do as far as, hip mobility, assessing cue angles, working on that glute med, working on ways to stabilize the knee or stabilize a landing, right? Landing in a good athletic position. It's amazing when you tell somebody to get, or ask, an athlete to get into an athletic position, and they look at you like, a what? So teaching that, even just that very intro, like quarter squat position with feet, shoulder width apart, toes forward, knees straight. For some people that takes an incredible amount of focus and body control to learn how to do that. But once you establish that, again, I think that significantly helps to reduce the risk of injury. So I think as we get our program more established and really start to incorporate some of that stuff, I think we're going to see a much greater reduction in injuries.
Sure. And I think sometimes, you hit on it pretty well, is people think like, all right, injury prevention means I have to get the bands out. I have to do all of these, different things. And you kind of, hit the nail on the head in a lot of ways of just simplifying things. Like, can this athlete even get into an athletic stance, not when they're on a field of competition, but when they're in a weight room or they're in a gym? And if they can't, like, what are some really basic ways we can grow them up and get them comfortable in those positions, so when they are kind of thrown into the mix, they're already in a better place than, maybe just saying, all right, let's start over from square one.
Sure. Absolutely.
Awesome. And then the other thing that I want to just kind of circle back on, and it's a totally separate note, but you talked a lot about the buy-in, and you talked a lot about, the kids themselves. Do you have any like, stories or examples of just kids getting excited, or sort of like an aha moment within the weight room? I know that's a broad question, but something we always like to, ask folks that are in the weight room with kids all the time. What are you seeing in that sense?
Sure. So I just actually talked to a couple kids yesterday, and a couple of I'd say our 2 most dedicated kids, and I said, hey, talk to me about the program that we've done since January. What worked for you, right? So I can make all these assumptions about why it's working for kids, but at the end of the day, it's about the kids and it's their perspective, right? So I actually just took a couple notes, and these are a couple things that they said, or a few things they said. So first of all, looking at platform, they said they love how user friendly it is. It's really easy to navigate, and they're on their phones all day anyways. So having something that you can whip out in the weight room and check something real quick, or watch a video really quickly, or update a weight or sets and reps, it works great. So it's super user friendly. It's really quick. And very, very intuitive, right? They love the idea of kind of measuring themselves and the graph component. So, okay, where did I start? Where am I at now? And where do I want to be, right? So that's when we talk about the education-based side of athletics, and our PE department and platform in general, right? So, teaching and coaching, right? It's all about the journey. It's all about that process to achieve that goal, or achieve the team's goal, right? So when they're measuring their progress consistently all the way along, it's part of that journey, it's part of that process, and it's part of that kind of adventure that we're all on, right? So I think that's really rewarding for them, is they're seeing the process, and they're seeing that the process is working, so they're going to continue with the process. I think they also really like the competition standpoint. I think we've seen this the most in our football program, but I think we kind of know that high school boys can be pretty competitive, right? Especially with each other, and especially within their friend and peer group. And I think that it's very healthy competition, right? But there's a little bit of trash talking sprinkled in there, like, hey, I got this, I got this weight, or I bet you can't do 185, or whatever it may be. But it's like, it's those little things that can sometimes push a teammate just a little bit further, get them hyped up a little bit. And I think that competition thing is really important.
Sure.
And it also builds that camaraderie, right? So if everybody's showing up and they're all doing the same thing, they know they're in it together, they have a common goal. And I think that it's almost like that horde mentality, right? So it's like, hey, if I'm doing this and you're doing that and Jimmy's doing this and Billy's doing it, like, let's get everybody in here and let's all do it together, right? So I think that the more you build that camaraderie and that essence of the team in the off season, the better this is going to get. And eye on the prize, right? Our football program hasn't been very successful as far as wins and losses go over the past couple of years, and I think some kids are pretty sick of it. I think they have a goal, and I think they are very determined to kind of change the culture, and it's really cool to see it happening from within their from the kids. It's the kids that are making a lot of the changes. And then
what about, just to follow up on that, what about other than football? Because I think football it makes sense for a lot of people, and it just kind of clicks, like, hey, football should be in here.
Yep.
Do you see other sports, female athletes, other groups that might not have always been as bought in or been getting into the weight room now taking that same competition, or is that something reserved to football?
So we're definitely getting there. So the other two groups that really started to get a team-based training sessions in the weight room have been our baseball program and field hockey program. Mm-hmm. And those have both been pretty successful. Field hockey's been meeting once a week throughout this spring, and same thing. I think it builds all of that off-season camaraderie that's so important to how you're going to interact with your teammates on the field, right? And I think that having those interactions, or meeting, let's say we're a middle and high school, right? So let's say you're an 8th grader coming up, and the ability to work with an upperclassman or even a freshman and sophomore before the first day of tryouts in August is huge. Getting comfortable with those players and those athletes that will eventually be your teammates, but they're not quite your teammates yet, can be really intimidating on August 15th. Whereas if you're in a more controlled environment, weight room, you're not trying out for anything, you're just learning like everybody else is. It builds a lot of that camaraderie, and we oftentimes see upperclassmen like lending that hand to the younger guys and saying, or the younger kids, and just saying like, hey, let me help you out. Like, here's how I learned it. Like, here's, this is a little trick that coach taught me along the way. And it's really cool to see those types of interactions.
Right. And I think the kid to kid, coach to coach mentality of like, I'm, a couple years older, a couple years, more the wiser, and I can help just with some little things. Obviously, you are running the ship, especially when it comes to those complex movements. But if it's just even a little thing of like, hey, this is how I did this warm up, or this is how I did X, Y, or Z, I think that goes a really long way.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so with that being said, is there a goal, or is there sort of a plan in place to help get others to start to get involved? Or what do you see as almost like your 3-year plan or 5-year plan? What would be that like next step for you guys at the school yourself?
Sure. So one goal that I have would be, and again, this is going to come down to collaborating with coaches as well, right? But my overall goal would be that every varsity program offers an off-season and in-season training program for their student athletes as a baseline. So if you're varsity girls basketball, boys soccer, girls soccer, field hockey, football, whatever it may be, you at least offer the program to your student athletes. And you could even say, I'd like you to go to the gym and do this on your own, or we could schedule weight room session times here at the school, but something to, again, allow those kids, if they want to take it upon themselves, to get better. Offer them the tools to get better. And ideally it's done as a team, but we know how busy kids are, right? It's oftentimes they're playing, sometimes we even have kids playing 2 sports during their season. They might be playing baseball and also AAU basketball on the weekend. That happens all the time. So, trying to sprinkle in one extra thing can be tough.
Sure.
And trying to schedule them all in the weight room all at the same time can be tough. But
right.
I think at least if all of our coaches give a plan to the kids and say, here's the program, here are the training videos, the local gym has helpful staff that can help to teach you some of these lifts as well if you need extra help, or I can stop in and do a few, some of the first few sessions, and then you can follow this program for the rest of the summer. Because I think back to, going into Endicott and my first year playing football there, we were just given the training program. So I had the tools to do it. Whether or not I did it was up to me, and I think some members of that team took that really seriously, and others didn't. So that's kind of the same for what we could offer. But at least we've then offered it to the kids, and again, ideally, everybody be in there at the same time. But we know how busy kids are, so it might be tough to squeeze them all in for an hour on any given day of the week.
Right, for sure. Awesome. Well, is there anything else that you feel like we haven't hit on, or again, any of those moments that you just feel like you want to share, or any other things that the kids have said to you or coaches have said to you about their experience in the weight room?
I think the thank yous are really cool. I think the kids are realizing how much time is being put into it, and I think because they know that the coaches and the staff are dedicated to helping to make them better, I think they really pick up on that. So I think my suggestion for any other program out there is be visible, take the time to get in there, be in there with the kids, teach the kids, train the kids, build those relationships with the kids, and they're going to trust you more. They're going to want to perform better, right? They're going to want to get better for you or for the program if you build those really good relationships, whether they're in season or out of season. But the weight room's a great place to do it.
Yeah, I think that's a perfect way to sum it up. Myself as a coach, my first off season, I said, here's a bunch of workouts. Here's, I assigned them through the app. I said, go ahead and go do them, but there still needs to be some guidance.
Sure.
Obviously it would be great if they took it upon themselves, but for a team like mine, it was brand new. And so all of a sudden I'm looking, I'm checking, they're not showing up during the supervised hours. So I said, you know what? I have to make the commitment as well. I'm going to show up, and we're going to start with once a week where I will be there, and you guys can come in on your own as well, but we'll sprinkle it in. Yep. And boom, I had a whole weight room full of kids. And it's just that mix of like, you're making that commitment with them, and it's that trust that, like you mentioned, really can carry a long way.
Totally. And I think it also just kind of comes down to that leadership aspect, right? So at the end of the day, like, we can give these kids all of the tools that they need, but they still need that educator, that coach, that teacher, that leader kind of guiding them through that. And I think when they see that their leader is committed, they're in turn going to be committed. They're going to see how dedicated that person is, and they're going to want to follow that person.
Right.
So I think it's huge to again, even if you're not a strength and conditioning specialist or an athletic trainer or whatever it may be, you don't need credentials to educate yourself as to how to be an effective teacher in the weight room. It can help, but at the end of the day, there's a lot of stuff you can teach these kids in the weight room, but you also need to take the time to teach yourself.
Right. So, I think it's a good thing to look at is, nobody should just go in there the blind leading the blind in terms of,
exactly.
that type of thing. But
sure,
we do want to be able to provide something. And it's a great point. We want the kids to know that they have someone in there, whether or not, especially at the high school level, we can get a full-time strength and conditioning coach.
Right.
So we have coaches that have made the investment or just spent a little bit of time watching some videos, doing some research on their own, talking to people like yourself that say, hey, I know you've done this before. I need a little bit of guidance.
Yep. Absolutely.
Awesome.
Absolutely.
Well, I appreciate your time, Devin. This has been an absolute pleasure to chat with you. For those of you that were listening, Devin, again, is a athletic director at a, pretty relatively mid-sized school. So as you listen to this and you think, where's the overlap? How can I do this? Folks like Devin are always happy to chat and welcome other coaches to message them, reach out to them. And at Platform, we're always happy to have those conversations as well. So Devin, thanks again. I appreciate your time.
Hey, thank you, Doug. This was a lot of fun. I appreciate it.
Yeah, it was. It was good. So I am going to sign off, and thanks again for listening. And then Devin, I'm not going to sign off. So hold on one second.